Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today I'm going to show you another of the new Pokémon GX that is going to be coming out in our Sun and Moon set. This is Gumshoes GX, who totally does not look like a prominent political figure. Now, the typing of colourless is kind of irrelevant. Back in the days of Garchomp C Level X, then being a colourless Pokemon was a big deal, but it's not, so it's not. Nice and simple. 210 HP, given what we've seen from other Pokemon GX, seems about right. For instance, Lurantis GX also has 210 HP. Job is a good un. Now, in terms of weakness, it is weak to fighting, which can be a bit of a pain. Something like, for instance, Carbink or Zygarde do not see a huge amount of play at the moment, but there is every possibility they're good cards. In the future, you never know, they might. Now, looking at the meat of the card, there are some very, very, very interesting things going on here. First of all, the ability Inspect. Once during your turn, you may have your opponent reveal his or her hand. Sounds kinda shady to me, just putting it out there. This is an ability which should not be overlooked. There are many, many questions. Every single game we play, every time we ever play a game, there are questions, and we're trying to figure out what to do, and the answer is, I don't know what the best play is, it depends what my opponent's going to do. So for argument's sake, let's say you're playing a Greninja deck, for instance. You've got one Froakie in hand, you can afford to bench a single Froakie if your opponent isn't going to play a Lysander, but if your opponent has a Lysander, you've got to play two Froakies to the bench at once, so your opponent cannot KO them both. Well, this will allow you to do so. It means you can predict what your opponent is going to do in the future. We've all had turns where we've got an N in hand and we're thinking, do I play the N? Now, I'd rather play an N than a Sycamore here. I've got stuff I don't want to discard. However, my opponent didn't play a supporter last turn. I don't want to give them a new hand. And sometimes they didn't play a supporter because they have nothing in their hand. And sometimes they didn't play a supporter because they've got an amazing hand and they've got cards they want to use the following turn. This ability, Inspect, will allow you to know for absolute certain whether your opponent has a good hand or not. Decisions like what to bench, whether to play an N or a Sycamore, etc., will help here. It could even be that your opponent's a couple turns in and you want to know if they're playing a particular card. Using Inspect might allow you to do so. I'll give you one more example. Oh, I really want to play a double colourless, but I don't if they've got an Enhanced Hammer in hand. So take a look. Now let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen, there are going to be times your opponent will just top deck the thing you were hoping not to see. Oh, they haven't got an Enhanced Hammer and then they top deck one. Or they'll play their own supporter like a Lysander and draw into something you weren't expecting. That's fine, but decisions in this game are made much easier when you have more information, and this gives you more information. Now, his main attack, Flying Headbutt, 100 for free energy, it's not good. Now, the fact that he's a colourless Pokemon means you can use double colourless energy here, which is a slight advantage. But let me be clear on this, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a great attack. Recently, I've been talking about free energy attacks not being particularly great. And although I suppose this is a 2 energy attack with double colourless, there are better places to put it. I don't have anything much cleverer to say about this attack, other than the fact that 100 for free energy just doesn't cut it in 2016. And actually, by the time it comes out, it will be 2017. And that brings us to the GX attack. These are the new attacks for these GX Pokemon. You can use one GX attack per game. You can play as many GX Pokemon as you like, but you can use one GX attack of any description per game. And at first glance, this doesn't look great, but I assure you it has its uses. 1 colourless energy, 10 damage, plus 50 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, let's say you're against something like a Primal Groudon, for instance. They've got to put 4 energy down, so you're going to be doing 210. Not quite a KO, but certainly significantly closer. If you've done 30 damage to that Groudon at any point, you will get the KO. Something like a Mega Mewtwo. Now, often they're going to be using Shrine of Memories to use damage change from Mewtwo EX. Now, the attack cost is Psychic colourless. A lot of the time, you're going to want to, or end up having to use Psychic double colourless, because one turn you don't have a basic, but you do have a double colourless. You can't do that if your opponent has a Gumshoes GX on the bench, because now you've got 4 energy, and they're hitting 210. And there's 2 things that this attack does. Number 1, it means if your opponent ever puts enough damage on their Pokemon, you can get a cheeky big KO. More likely, your opponent isn't actually ever going to put you in a position, if you're playing a good opponent, to use this to get a one-hit KO. But that's okay. Because what you do is you force your opponent to play without ever letting you get an easy one-hit KO. And you know what? I'm okay with this. Either they put themselves in a position where I get an easy KO for a single energy, or they play the entire game, at least up until I use a GX attack, they play the entire game trying to make sure I can't use this attack. And you know what? I am perfectly okay with this. I don't think Gumshoes GX is a Pokemon that you're going to use to build a deck around. I honestly don't. I don't think it's good enough. But I think I am going to be thinking 1/1 Gumshoes GX, that's one of the basic, one of the GX, in every deck I ever build. Whether I actually put it in the final cut of the deck, I don't know, but I'm going to be considering it. Because the ability is absolutely phenomenal. And the GX attack is either a nice cheeky KO, or it just forces your opponent to play around and to make sure that you're not using that attack, so they're putting fewer energy down to try and avoid it. And you know what? That puts me in a pretty good position. The one hesitation I have with Gumshoes GX is purely the fact that being a GX Pokemon, it gives up 2 prizes, which is a little bit of a problem. I don't like having a tech sitting on my bench that's going to give up 2 prizes if it's dragged into the active and KO'd. This is something we're going to have to live with for the time being. Now, let's make no mistake about this. In my previous video, I looked at Lurantis GX. Lurantis is a stunning GX, which is probably going to be at the centre of the format for years to come. As a side note, and I do warn you when I look at Japanese cards, the translations are sometimes off, Lurantis GX is any basic energy attached with its attack, not just grass, making it even better than it already looked. This is not Gumshoes GX, but Gumshoes GX fits nicely into the realm of very interesting tech Pokemon. And when you're building your decks in future, I think you should have it in mind. And let's not forget, when you're talking about having a tech Pokemon, a lot of the time your opponent doesn't want to take out a tech on the bench because they're too busy taking out your attackers, and if they take out your tech, your attackers remain, your energy remains. Let's face it, we all have Shaymin EX on the bench most games that our opponents can Lysander up and KO for their final 2 prizes. Why not have a Gumshoes as well, so your opponent can take out that for their final 2 prizes instead of a Shaymin? Makes no difference to us, but we are using him and taking advantage of him all game. It's not amazing, but I like it as a nice little tech. So, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. There is a comment section. Use it. There is a like button. Use it. There is a subscribe button. To be honest, if you haven't used it by now, you're making me very sad. But I will forgive you if you use it now and get a friend to use it on your behalf. You can, of course, as always, follow me on Twitter @TheWassy, and you should remember, as always, by far the most important thing, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.